You were the smart kid, the one teachers pointed to, the one parents bragged about at dinner parties, the one who never really had to try. And somehow that made it worse. Because now you're an adult, and for the first time in your life, intelligence alone isn't enough. And somewhere deep down, you know you're operating at maybe 30% of what you're actually capable of, and you have absolutely no idea why. Here's the truth nobody told you. Being smart was a trap, and today we're going to spring you out of it. Welcome to Ember and Oak. I'm going to show you exactly why high-intelligence people systematically underperform, and more importantly, the precise system to finally close the gap between your potential and your reality.
Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you have a Ferrari, not a rental car, not a sedan, a legitimate, hand-built 700 horsepower Ferrari, the kind of machine that was engineered to do things other cars physically cannot do. Now, imagine that Ferrari never leaving the driveway. It just sits there, gleaming, impressive to look at, but going absolutely nowhere. That's you. And I don't say that to be harsh. I say it because I've been that Ferrari. I've talked to hundreds of people who were that Ferrari. Brilliant, capable, full of potential, and completely, mysteriously stuck. The problem isn't the engine. The problem is that nobody ever taught you how to drive. See, the school system, and I say this with genuine love for teachers, was accidentally designed to reward a very specific kind of intelligence, the kind that absorbs information quickly, recalls it under pressure, and performs on cue. If you had that skill, you got straight A's, gold stars, and an identity built entirely around the phrase, "You're so smart." And that identity, it's been quietly sabotaging you ever since. Today, we're breaking this down into 5 chapters. Stick with me through all of them because each one builds on the last, and by the end, you're going to have a complete framework for rewiring how you operate. Let's start at the beginning, because this problem has roots. When you're consistently told you're smart as a child, your brain does something very logical. It builds an identity around that label. I am a smart person. Smart is what I am. And for a while, that identity works perfectly. School rewards you for it, adults celebrate it, life feels like it's confirming something true about you. But here's the invisible damage happening underneath. Stanford psychologist Dr. Carol Dweck spent decades studying this exact phenomenon. What she found was that children praised for their intelligence rather than their effort develop what she calls a fixed mindset. They start to believe their abilities are static, that they either have talent or they don't, and that having to work hard at something is actually evidence that they aren't talented at it. Read that again. Struggling becomes proof of failure rather than proof of growth. So what happens when the smart kid hits something genuinely difficult for the first time? Maybe it's university-level math, or a real job with real stakes, or a relationship that requires emotional intelligence nobody graded them on. They don't lean in. They retreat. Not because they're lazy, but because trying hard and still failing would shatter the only identity they've ever had. If you've built your entire self-concept on being effortlessly capable, then effort itself becomes a threat. Putting in real work and still struggling means confronting the terrifying possibility that maybe you're not as special as everyone said. So, instead, the smart kid does something brilliant and self-destructive at the same time. They stop trying all the way. Because if you never fully commit, you never fully fail. You could always tell yourself, I could have done it if I'd really tried. That story keeps the identity intact. It keeps the Ferrari in the driveway, but at least the Ferrari is still pristine. This is the trap, and the first step out of it is just naming it, which you've now done. Now let's talk about the weapon the smart kid uses to stay stuck. Perfectionism. It sounds virtuous. It sounds like caring deeply. But I want you to hear this clearly. Perfectionism is procrastination wearing a blazer. Here's how it works in practice. You have an idea for a project, a business, a creative work, a conversation you need to have. Instead of starting imperfectly, you wait. You research, you plan, you build the most elaborate mental architecture around this thing, and none of it involves actually doing the thing. You buy the notebook, but don't open it. You watch 12 tutorials before writing a single line of code. You spend 3 hours designing the system for your new habit instead of just doing the habit once. Your lizard brain, and I mean this literally, the amygdala, the ancient fear center sitting at the base of your skull, cannot distinguish between a genuine physical threat and the emotional threat of public imperfection. To your nervous system, shipping something mediocre and getting eaten by a predator register as the same category of danger. So, it stalls you. It says, not yet. Just a little more preparation. Just a little more research. Just wait until you can do it right. And the cruel irony is that the smarter you are, the better you are at justifying the stall. You can construct an airtight intellectual argument for why now isn't the right time. Your intelligence becomes the engine of your avoidance. I call this the planning paradox. The more capable you are of envisioning a perfect outcome, the more paralyzed you become by the gap between that vision and your current starting point. The breakthrough here is understanding that action creates clarity, not the other way around. You do not think your way into better doing, you do your way into better thinking. Every first draft is supposed to be bad. Every first attempt is supposed to be awkward. The first pancake always gets thrown away. That's not failure, that's just how pancakes work. The question is whether you're willing to make the bad first pancake so you can get to the good ones. Here's a reframe that changed everything for me. Mistakes aren't the opposite of success. They're the raw material of it. Every error is a data point. Every stumble is a calibration. The people you admire most in any field aren't the ones who avoided failure. They're the ones who failed faster and learned harder than everyone else.
All right, so now we understand the problem. Let's talk about the solution. And it starts with one equation I want you to write down. Talent times effort squared equals results. Notice something important. Effort is squared. It's the exponential variable. This means that a person with average talent and high effort will almost always outperform a highly talented person with low effort. Not because the talented person isn't capable, but because squandering compounding returns over time is the most expensive mistake a human being can make. Think about it in financial terms. If you have a savings account and you never deposit money, it doesn't matter how high the interest rate is, the account stays empty. Talent without effort is a savings account you refuse to fund. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because effort alone isn't enough either. You need directed effort. This is the piece most high-potential people are missing. There's a concept in performance psychology called deliberate practice, developed by researcher Anders Ericsson after studying world-class performers across every field: music, chess, athletics, surgery. His finding was striking. Elite performers don't just practice more, they practice differently. Deliberate practice has 3 components that separate it from just going through the motions. First, it operates at the edge of your ability. Not so hard that you collapse, not so easy that you coast. The zone right at the boundary of your current competence, what psychologists call the stretch zone. This is where growth actually lives. Second, it involves immediate feedback. You need to know quickly whether what you just did worked or didn't. This is why a great coach is worth more than 1,000 hours of solo practice. They compress the feedback loop. Third, it requires full mental engagement. You cannot be on autopilot. The moment a task becomes mindless repetition, the growth stops. This is why someone can spend 20 years in a job and still be mediocre. They stopped being present to what they were doing a long time ago. So here's the practical question. In whatever area you want to grow, are you practicing deliberately? Are you finding the edge of your ability, building in feedback, and staying fully engaged? If you're honest with yourself, probably not always. And that's okay, because now
you have a mat.
We've talked about the trap, the weapon, and the equation. Now let's talk about the deepest lever of all, who you believe you are. Everything we've covered so far is a behavior strategy. This chapter is about something more fundamental, identity transformation. Because here's the thing, you will never consistently act in ways that contradict your self-image. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with discipline, you will find endless creative ways to struggle with discipline, even when you have all the right systems in place. Your behavior is always serving your identity, whether you're aware of it or not. So the goal isn't just to build better habits. The goal is to become a different person. Specifically, someone for whom those habits are natural and expected. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, calls this identity-based change. Instead of starting with outcomes, I want to run a marathon, or processes, I'll run 3 times a week, you start with identity. I am a runner. And then you ask, what would a runner do today? But here's the part that matters most for the former smart kid. You have to be willing to be a beginner. That sounds simple. It isn't. For someone whose entire identity was built on competence, being a beginner is existentially threatening. Walking into a gym and not knowing how the machines work, starting a business and making obvious rookie mistakes, trying a new skill and being genuinely and visibly bad at it. This feels like death to the part of you that needed to be the smart one. But I want to offer you a different frame. Being a beginner isn't a sign that you don't belong. It's a sign that you're growing. The discomfort you feel when you're bad at something new, that's not shame. That's your nervous system recalibrating. That's neuroplasticity in action, your brain literally building new pathways. Every expert was once a catastrophic beginner. Every person you admire spent time being embarrassingly incompetent at the thing they're now known for. The difference between them and the people who stayed stuck is simply this: they stayed in the room. They didn't let the discomfort of being a beginner mean something terrible about who they are. Here's a practice to start shifting your identity right now. I call it evidence collection. Every day, look for small actions that are consistent with the person you want to become and mentally note them. Not huge wins, tiny ones. You made a healthy meal choice. You started the difficult task even though you didn't feel like it. You asked for help instead of pretending to know something. You showed up imperfectly and kept going anyway. Each one of these is a vote for a new identity. And your brain, like a very literal democracy, starts to believe whatever gets the most votes. All right, final chapter. And this is where we bring everything together into a daily operating system you can actually use. I call this the productive struggle system, and it has 4 components. Component 1, the honest audit. Before anything else, you need to get clear on where you've been hiding. Where in your life are you protecting the Ferrari in the driveway? Is it a creative project you've been planning for 18 months? A hard conversation you've been postponing? A skill you've wanted to develop but keep finding reasons to delay? Name it. Write it down. Shine a light on it. Component 2, the minimum viable action. Take that thing you just named and make it so small that refusing to start becomes embarrassing. Not the whole project, not the perfect version, the smallest possible first step that still moves you forward. Want to write a book? Open a document and write 1 paragraph. Want to start working out? Put your shoes on and do 5 minutes. Want to have the hard conversation? Send the text that opens the door. The goal isn't progress. The goal is proof. Proof to your nervous system that you can start and survive. Once you have that proof, the next step gets easier. This is how momentum is actually built, not through motivation, but through micro-evidence. Component 3, the feedback loop. Build in a mechanism to learn from every attempt. This doesn't have to be complicated. A simple journal entry at the end of each day asking 2 questions.
What did I learn today? What would I do differently? That's it. 2 questions, 5 minutes. But over weeks and months, those answers become a personalized manual for how you specifically operate and grow. Component 4, the identity anchor. Every morning, before you open your phone or your email, spend 60 seconds answering this question. Who am I becoming? Not who you are, not what you want, who you are becoming. Write 1 sentence. Say it out loud if you have to. This isn't magic, it's direction. It's telling your brain before the noise of the day begins which version of you is showing up today. Put these 4 pieces together: honest audit, minimum viable action, feedback loop, identity anchor, and you have a system that doesn't rely on willpower, inspiration, or perfect conditions. It works on a Tuesday when you're tired. It works when you're overwhelmed. It works because it's designed for real human beings, not the idealized version of yourself you keep waiting to become.
Here's what I want to leave you with. You were given a Ferrari. That part was never the problem. The problem was that you were handed the keys before anyone taught you that driving takes practice, that engines need fuel, and that the point of a Ferrari isn't to keep it perfect, it's to drive it. The smart kid grew up believing that potential was the destination. It isn't. Potential is just the starting line. What you do from here, the imperfect attempts, the deliberate practice, the willingness to be a beginner, the small daily votes for a new identity, that's where your actual life gets built. So here's your challenge for this week. Identify one area where you've been protecting your potential instead of using it, and do the minimum viable action today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, today. If this video spoke to something real in you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear this. And if you haven't subscribed to Ember and Oak yet, now is the time. We release strategic frameworks like this every week to help you build a life that actually matches what you're capable of. I want to hear from you in the comments. What's one area where you know you've been playing it safe? Be honest. This community is full of people who get it, and the conversation down there is always worth reading. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.